Smart communications for the smarter business.
Turn your fingers into a microphone and talk back. WGNSradio.com is Rutherford County's online source for what matters to you. WGNSradio.com. The Good Neighbor Network, FM 101.9 and AM 1450 Murfreesboro, FM 100.5 Smyrna, and online at WGNSradio.com. This is the Roundtable. A look at the news, views, politics, and people that are shaping Rutherford County.
Good morning, Bill Kraus on a beautiful Thursday morning. Great day. Great day to be alive, like any day to be alive. We are so fortunate this morning to have a visitor from Middle Tennessee State University. We're having Dr. Chandra, I'm going to get that right, Chandra Story, who teaches in the Health and Human Performance Program at MTSU. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you.
It's a wonderful morning to have you with us.
Thank you. It is a beautiful morning.
And we always like to ask our visitors, tell us about yourself, where you were born, where you went to school, where you have worked before MTSU. A little bit about you.
A little bit. All right. Absolutely. I am from Atlanta, Georgia, very proudly. I was born and raised there and still enjoy going back home. And
despite the traffic.
Gotcha. And so once I left Atlanta, I went to University of Tennessee, Knoxville for my undergraduate degree in medical technology. Wanted to be like my dad somewhat because my dad is a medical technologist and owned his own laboratory in Atlanta. So I wanted to leave school and work with him. And so after school, I got married to my sweetheart, Zavery, and then we moved to the windy city of Chicago.
Oh, from Atlanta to Chicago.
From Atlanta to Chicago.
Did you have to change being fans of sports teams?
No.
You didn't have to go from the White Sox from the Braves? Or?
No, I still kept the Braves, but then went on and thought I might embrace some of the Chicago teams as well.
The Cubs needed some help.
They needed some help, so I embraced them as well. And so we lived in Chicago for a while, and I continued to work as a medical technologist.
Did you get used to the weather?
In Chicago? No, absolutely not.
The windy city.
The windy city. I did not get used to that. I longed for the warmth of Atlanta, but there I was. And so I worked in a hospital there in Chicago, Holy Cross Hospital, and on the clinical side, really worked with a lot of diverse populations. I was working at a Lithuanian Catholic hospital.
Wow.
In a neighborhood that became Hispanic and African American.
Wow.
And so we saw a lot of health concerns. We saw a lot of issues around linguistic competency, cultural competency, all of those things. And so I enjoyed my time there, learned a lot, enjoyed the food. Chicago's an amazing city of culture and food. Enjoyed that. And after that, my husband got a job opportunity, and so we moved to Boise, Idaho.
Of all places.
The land of potatoes, where I never saw a potato unless I was in the grocery store.
I always thought Boise was in the mountains, but I was invited to be a speaker at an organization at Boise, and it was like high desert.
Yeah.
It was not exactly what I figured. I loved the town. I was there a couple of days, but it was not what I pictured.
Yes. And so I could see that. And it's a beautiful city. We enjoyed our time there very much. And I worked for Idaho State University there. And I got my master's, though, at Boise State University during that time.
In health?
In health promotion. So I wanted to move out of the clinical part and more into the community, more the public health side, after seeing all these community-based issues in Chicago.
Yes.
So I did that there in Boise. We really enjoyed our time there. And from all of that, I also worked at Idaho State University.
Going to Boise, but working at Idaho State
University, because there's a chapter there in Boise that I worked for and ended up doing mental health work. Which was community health education, which is part of my major. Got to work with wonderful parents.
So you're working primarily with children?
So really, I was working with parents because the program was all about us creating a system of care is what they called it. So I got to work with mental health practitioners and schools, not directly with the children, but we wanted to set up education and marketing programs that would help the families so that they could advocate and support their children. So that was such a blessing. And I'm still in touch with some of those families via social media. Some of their children are grown up now.
Oh, sure, and having
doing
their own
well,
children.
Having their own children. They're, in college. So what a beautiful time, and still igniting my passion for health promotion, health education. Then I went on to become a state coordinator for a suicide prevention program. And I'm not a clinician, so I didn't work directly, but we got to work with, again, families, state entities. I provided education on suicide prevention along with other people in the state, and this was just education. And I tell people I provided education in cities where there were more animals than people.
Wow.
Because, you're talking about rural states. So you have to imagine and picture a rural state.
1 million people, 2 million cattle.
Yeah, 2 million cattle. And families who would have to drive hours just to get to a psychiatrist. Picturing how we got a chance to work with the governor in the state of Idaho and his wife and do art displays and things to bring awareness on children's mental health, and some of that went to media outlets, and what a rewarding time.
Exactly. I have to intercede at this point and ask you a question related to that.
Sure.
And this probably transcends all of your health outreach, is what can be the role of grandparents being the drivers of information in support of health care? We talk about parents, but we begin to think, we always think, well, we take care of our grandparents. The grandparents want to take care of grandchildren as well. And are they a strong resource?
Oh, they are
that
very strong
should be
resource.
tapped.
And I'm so glad you asked me that, because some of my work, our work, I'm going to say, because it's never anything you do alone, our work in what we were told to call Indian country in Idaho is we worked on some reservations, and they told us to call it Indian country, and so I keep saying that. So as we worked in Indian country and worked with families, like you just said, grandparents were so vital because of this community-based approach. And we actually went up to northern Idaho and did some work and some artwork and thinking about awareness with communities. And you can't imagine the number of grandparents who were there, and grandparents who also want to learn more about the warning signs of mental illness in children. So you're so right. I mean, and that's what we mean when we talk about bringing in culture, the culture of our families.
Yes.
And those grandparents.
Yes. Yeah. So you finished at Boise State?
Finished at Boise State, did that, then went to University of Tennessee, Knoxville, did my doctorate in community health education.
Well, you'd relocated to Knoxville.
Relocated to Knoxville, went back to where it all started with my undergrad and where I met my husband, and so went back there, and then my first faculty appointment was at Oklahoma State University.
Oh, so you were being attracted back to the West and back to the wide open spaces. Cattle and hogs. And
people.
Yes.
And still having my interest in community health education, and as a Black woman, and thinking about all these different groups that I've been so blessed to work with. How do we continue to make a difference and think about, health outcomes and health disparities? Because there was a disparity in, different health outcomes in Chicago and in Idaho. So this is still on my heart. And my dissertation was about African Americans and the flu vaccine uptake.
Oh.
And so I'm really concentrating, I'm thinking, and I'm meeting all these people, and it's starting to crystallize my focus around my concerns with African American health. And with women's health, meeting women.
How much of your dissertation, not only your hypothesis, but your conclusions, could be applied to African American women responding to COVID inoculations?
So I think that a lot of that could be applied in the sense of, if you look at the literature, all of the literature, historically, when we look at African American health, there's been a warranted mistrust of the health system. When we look from everything from the Tuskegee experiments to even eugenics to involuntary sterilizations that not too long ago occurred in North Carolina.
Exactly.
So all those things when we look at the history. So I do think those things can compare. One thing that's really interesting about my dissertation findings was that we do see the importance of the conversations between the physicians and patients in terms of trust.
Yes.
And so many people said, if I have a conversation with my physician and things are explained well, this can make a difference in my perceptions of, vaccines and many other things in terms of health.
Absolutely. A very difficult question that I've tried to find the answer, and it's probably borders on ethics of medical care more than the practice. And this is what it would be. And I initially will look upon it as far as age and geriatrics, but it could be applicable to economic and racial background as well. And here's what it is. If you are diagnosed with a very serious illness, does your age and does your economic placement and does your ethnic background affect of what your treatment will be? And will your treatment, let's put it in a more pragmatic sense. If I'm 25 years of age and I've been diagnosed with a life-threatening event, will the treatment also include the long-range effects of the treatment and its application to who I am? If I'm 85 years old, is the treatment going to be just to respond to the immediate pain or discomfort without a long-term conclusion?
That is such a complex question, sir.
We only have an hour show. I'm sorry.
I can come back next week. No.
Well, we'll do a series. How's that?
We can have a whole series on that for sure. You mentioned so many of what we call the variables and what we call the social determinants of health, right? The fact that where we live, work, and play impacts our health. So I'm going to take some of that apart, which directly relates to the book chapter that we're going to talk about.
Exactly.
So when we think about these different health issues, and as you mentioned, what makes the impact on the type of treatment that you receive or choose to receive, we know, and happy Black History Month to everyone.
Oh, yes, I was going to say that.
And so we know, I'm just going to take an example. When we think about Black women in general and look at the statistics, we know that when we look at things like breast cancer, the diagnoses of breast cancer in Black women and white women aren't necessarily that different, but the survival rates are much different in that Black women die at a much faster rate. So the reason why I'm mentioning this is we also know from the literature when we look at health communication, physicians tend not to share innovative health innovations or strategies with Black women or Black people as quickly as they would with Caucasian patients or other patients. So I'm saying that because I think that also impacts the choices that people make in terms of treatment, what they know and what they don't know, coupled with that mistrust for some generations of Black people.
Well, and does it also relate
age.
to diet and lifestyle? And do you eat your vegetables or you eat your fast foods?
Do you eat your That's a really good question. That relates back to our social determinants of health. And when we look at community health and look at health inequities, we know that it's so much more intense than that. There can be situations where I want to eat a vegetable, but I live in a food desert.
Exactly.
I want to work out, but I live in a place that is not safe. I want to work out, but perhaps my version of working out is not the same as what this doctor keeps telling me. I want to go take a walk and maybe not run a marathon. Or maybe I do want to run a marathon. But there's so many variables involved in that when we look at the external factors and how they're impacting our individual and cultural choices.
Well, without naming the restaurant, which I will not, but there was, and I think there's still around, a couple of them, there's a restaurant that specializes in all-you-can-eat buffet. And it has a buffet and a buffet and a buffet, huge amount.
Huge amount.
And I would go there, would take my staff when I was with the city of Oak Hill, and I will tell you that obesity directly related to what people were selecting at the
different
buffet.
types of selections.
I mean, I would see people who would carry on the right hand a tray full of food and the left hand another tray full of food, and they had an obesity problem. So I guess where I'm going with this is that your lifestyle can have a long-term as well as a short-term effect on one's overall health.
Absolutely, our lifestyles play a factor. We also know within the research when we look at obesity now that there's so many factors, including genetic components that can be difficult for people to overcome. And we also know that it's a very complex structure there in terms of stressors, in terms of lifestyles, in terms of our peer groups. So it's very complex. And so again, happy Black History Month. When we look at this issue of obesity, especially within Black women, and look at all these other health outcomes, we must look at the external factors and also consider that the American Public Health Association also considers racism as a social determinant of health. And we know from our research now that racism definitely impacts the physical body, which impacts stressors, which can impact hormones, which can make it very difficult for people to lose weight, even in the most ideal situations, even when they are trying to take physical, I'm going to say literal responsibility for their health outcomes. And moving back to the South, I do know that we all enjoy, what we like to eat and all of those
fried
choices.
Chicken.
We all enjoy our fried chicken.
And fried okra.
Yes, and as my master's, my friend who has a master's in nutrition always says, moderation, moderation. And so, but we must also deal with these external factors that impact our stress levels, which impact our choices.
Exactly.
Yes.
I would love to see research. I'm sure there is research, but I would love to see research done on men and women who are very thin, not anorexic, but very thin, and they can eat and eat and eat,
Right.
and they don't gain an ounce.
And
What's driving it?
And I think that speaks to that genetic component that I mentioned literally. And as we always learn in public health, it's nature and nurture. And so it's those genetic components and then also externally what's encouraged. And I'm very encouraged because when we look at African American health right now, and my chapter is around blessed positionality.
Which we're going to talk about after the next commercial.
Yeah, but kind of thinking about that too, seeing so many positive things happening in terms of promoting health. But we're going to wait for the commercial for that.
Well, do want to talk about this. And, when you get older, as long as you have your brain and your health, it's a blessing and a resource.
It is. Yes,
However,
it is.
I guess I would say, and as you get older, you can compare. And you can look at old movies. If you want to look at movies made in the 1940s, 1950s, and you take a look how age was characterized, how somebody who was 60 years old was an old granny wearing old granny clothes, was granny hair, however you want to describe it.
Yes.
And you take a look at 60 in the 1960s, was totally different than 60 or 70 or 80 today.
Yes.
And that has to do with longevity, which is what
it does.
drives our cost of health, of course. To maintain and to live and to survive, it costs people to be preserved in their 70s, 80s, 90s. I asked a class, for example, recently, how many people have you met personally who are 90 and over? Hands go up. If I asked that question 50, 60 years ago, no, that's a dinosaur. I'd see them in the museum. We will be right back after a word or two, but I do want to share that this is a wonderful conversation with Dr. Chandra Story, professor at the Health and Human Performance. Still got to learn about that human performance
Health and Human Performance
at MTSU.
Department.
We'll be right back.
Thank you.
This is Stan Vaught. I'm a lot like you, a husband, father, farmer, auctioneer, and community supporter. I'm now a candidate for school board. In the last cases, Walter Hill, Milton, Leanna, Oakland, and Siegel communities. I believe in community schools, vocational education, and getting education back to the basics. I'd appreciate your support for school board.
Early voting going on now. Election day is March 5th. Paid for by Stan Vaught for school board. Stan Vaught, treasurer.
Hey, it's Scott. When it comes to health, there are numbers that every man needs to know, including your testosterone number. I recommend Low T Center, where they make it quick and easy to get your levels checked, and it's only $25. You walk in, take a simple blood test, and with their on-site lab, you'll get your results in about 25 minutes. Low T levels can make you feel tired and grumpy. They can cause a lack of motivation and drive. It can raise your cholesterol, cause weight gain, and loss of muscle mass. Go to lowtcenter.com right now to book your appointment online. Low T Center, reinventing men's healthcare.
Boots, Boots, Boots. French's Shoes and Boots is your hometown store for the latest in Southern style and unbeatable prices. French's famous bargain racks are loaded with deals on name brand footwear priced 70 to 90% below retail. Come see why French's has been Tennessee's favorite place to shop since 1903. Find that new favorite pair you'll be proud to wear at French's Shoes and Boots.
Shop at French's Shoes and Boots.
1837 South Church Street in Murfreesboro.
Learn to make money 5 ways with rental real estate. Double your money with apartments. And get your map to financial freedom. And that map starts with a free workshop. Sign up now at lifestylesunlimited.com. Click on the Join Free Workshop tab and attend online or in person. That's lifestylesunlimited.com. Lifestylesunlimited.com. Again, that's lifestylesunlimited.com. Limited seating, unlimited potential.
Looking for something to take your mind off this traffic? How about a true story of instant success? Did you hear about the 2 friends who went grocery shopping in Ashland City and picked up everything on their list plus $75,000? Or the one where a truck driver made a last-minute stop off Interstate 40 and drove off with a cool $1 million? All their lives changed in an instant, and yours could too. So stop by your local retailer for your chance with instant games from the Tennessee Lottery. Game-changing, life-changing fun. Please play responsibly.
This is Good Neighbor Events with Bart Walker. Brought to you by AmeriCare Pest Control and the law offices of John Day.
This is a paid legal ad.
When a family member is lost as a result of someone else's negligence, the grief can be unbearable. It also leaves you with a lot of questions like, how did this happen? Who's responsible? And is my family going to be okay? That's a lot to go through, but with the law offices of John Day on your side, you don't have to go through any of it alone. We understand what you're going through, and we have the experience to get the answers, justice, and compensation your family deserves. Call the law offices of John Day.
If it's happening around here, WGNS will let you know about it. If you're grieving the loss of a loved one, there are 2 grief support groups right here in Murfreesboro. One meets every Wednesday morning at 10 at the St. Clair Street Senior Center. The other is a walking grief support group tour, and they meet under the shelter at Oaklands Park every Thursday morning at 9:30. You've been asking, where do I take classes that teach me how to better use my computer? The Technology Engagement Center is offering 2 free classes. One's every Monday from 3:30 to 5 in the afternoon, and the other is on Tuesday afternoons from 2:30 to 3:30. They're both free, and they're at the Technology Engagement Center. That's at 306 Minerva Drive. Get with them for more information. Don't throw away old glory. Bring your tattered American flag to WGNS and let the girls from BSA Troop 2019 at Trinity United Methodist Church retire it with dignity. Plus, we also recycle Bibles. Those are WGNS Good Neighbor events.
Good Neighbor weather.
We'll see sunny skies here for this afternoon, a high in the mid-60s. Winds out of the west to 5 to 15 miles per hour, gusting as high as 25. I'm meteorologist Jennifer Wojcicki on News Radio WGNS. Currently, it's 51.
Broadcasting from the Middle Tennessee Electric Studios, MTE Sharing Change has now donated more than $11 million to local nonprofits, assisting worthy causes in our community. MTE, serving to make life better since 1936.
This is the Roundtable from News Radio WGNS on FM 101.9 and AM 1450 Murfreesboro, FM 100.5 Smyrna, and worldwide at WGNSradio.com.
Hello there again, Bill Kraus on the Thursday morning Roundtable, and we are having a delightful visit, not only on the air, even off on the air, because once you get into the whole world of healthcare and medical service and what have you. You can go in detail on and on because it affects our lives directly as well as indirectly. So we are visiting with Dr. Chandra Story, who is Professor of Health and Human Performance at Middle Tennessee. Before we talk about the chapter you have recently completed for inclusion in a very special book, talk about what does human performance mean in your department?
Yes, so I am interim department chair for the Department of Health and Human Performance. My colleagues are amazing. This department consists of programs like athletic training, exercise science, physical education, tourism and hospitality management, leisure and sports management.
Oh, you really cover a gamut.
Physical education.
No,
we cover a
stop
gamut.
for a moment.
Speech
Tourist.
and language. Pathology and ideology. We have 7 programs.
Was this all of the above?
This is all of the above, and so we're all about helping communities and individuals, whether it's through leisure, whether it's through helping with speech, whether it's through studying exercise, whether it's community and public health. That is what we do, and so it's an honor to work with my colleagues.
Fantastic. But so do you try to measure human performance based on medical, based on other factors?
Yes, and we have that name because we've got community and public health. We have things that are very health and speech and language pathology, and then we have people who connect health to, quote, human performance, meaning the science of exercise and the science of athletic training and physical education, where they actually are training future teachers, really, people who are going to the schools and teach physical education. So it's a wonderful place to be.
When I first saw that, I thought you also had theater and drama with performance.
That is a performance, but they're not with us. And it is healthy.
Absolutely. Well, talk about your contribution to a book. Tell us a little bit about the book.
Yes.
And you just recently completed a very key chapter in that book.
Yes.
How did you get involved in the first place, and what was some of the process?
Yes, so I got involved because I was a fellow for the American Evaluation Association several years ago, and I met an amazing scholar. Her name is Dr. Cerisi West Olatunji, and she's at Xavier University in Louisiana, which is an HBCU, and we worked together well. We did some projects, and so she and some other colleagues came together and began to talk about this concept of Black womanhood as blessed positionality. Now, I'm going to pause here because we all know what marginalized means, right? Someone who's in the margins. And so often that is a description that is used for Black women and other racial and ethnic groups. So they came together and started talking about how we could reposition theoretically and conceptually this idea of Black womanhood, instead of a place in the margins, as a place of blessed positionality.
Could that not be applied to any group?
Absolutely.
No, I mean, you want that for any group.
We want that for everyone. And so when we look at the research, however, and look at our history and even consider enslavement, Jim Crow, post-Jim Crow, and up to now, we have a historical narrative of certain populations, and especially Black women being portrayed as those who are in the margins. So absolutely, as we look at history and look at how we as Black women have embraced other groups and women as well, this is something we want to continue to stand in and position ourselves in, despite some of the narratives that do exist about us. And so that is how this beautiful idea came about. And then with me being a professor of community and public health, and as I stated earlier, I've worked in rural communities, Indian country, clinical settings, and now I'm in the academic Chicago, the Windy City.
In the urban area.
In the urban areas. And so now looking at all of that, the book chapter that I entitled is called Reclaiming Our Health, meaning Black women, as a place of liberation.
Could this model be used, applied to any group? I mean, you created a model for Black women. Can that model, with some modification perhaps, be applied to any group of women?
Absolutely. We would want other women to come along and understand that. And again, historically, And presently, we're looking at Black women's health. And so I'm glad you mentioned that, because some of this book chapter, the entire book is rooted in principles of Black feminism. And so when we look at Black feminism and look at what Patricia Hill Collins noted as creating our own tools to resist these intersecting oppressions, meaning we as Black women dealing with things that all women deal with, but then also dealing with what we deal with as Black women in terms of racism. Part of that is, how do we use this collective identity to connect to other groups? Because you mentioned other groups in those things that may have some commonalities, but continually recognizing our uniqueness and blessed positionality in society and understanding our history and using that to self-define ourselves moving forward.
And you would have to go one step further with Black women, with the crime rate and the murder and the death and the loss of lives in urban communities, for example. A Black mother has to also take on the protection of her children. And not only the physical protection of her children, but the psychological protection, emotional protection of her children. And that in itself would require certain strategies and techniques.
That would require certain strategies and techniques. And that's why you make a good point. You're talking about mental health. And that's why this whole chapter is about reclaiming our health as a place of liberation. And what we've done in this chapter, to your point, what I feel like you're talking about is resilience.
Exactly.
Thinking about Black women in different situations, and how are we continuing to care for ourselves, and how are we continuing to care for our children?
An experience I had last summer, and I've said it before on the air, and it's something that has become very much of an integral part of who I am and what I am. Last summer, I was doing several workshops in the inner city in Nashville, and children from the age of 6 through 15 into different age groups of how they can improve their writing and communications. And I will never, never, never forget a group of 6 and 7-year-old little kiddies from the inner city, and I would say, okay, we're going to start out right where you want to be 5 years from now. Where do you want to be 5 years from now? And I shall never forget, a little sweet little girl said, I worry about where I'm going to be a year from now. Am I going to be alive? And the violence, the gang fighting, the shootings, I don't know if I'll be alive. And I thought, a 6-year-old baby is wondering whether she has a future even
and
into
how
1 year.
tragic that is, right?
Oh,
and
much more than just tragic.
Yeah,
it's just we can't sustain that.
We cannot sustain that.
It's got to be handled.
To change.
So I think that's a foot line in terms of where we are.
In terms of where we are, and I spoke earlier about the social determinants of health, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because safety is part of that, right? And environment. And so part of we as Black women recognizing our blessed positionality throughout history and now brings us into these spaces where we can talk about how are we currently impacting some of these issues, because we do have a lot of Black women and mothers who are standing up in neighborhoods and advocating and trying to make things better and addressing some of these issues. And how do we continue to do that? And to your point, how do we continue to do that as we have in the past? How do we continue to do that in the present going forward with all of our communities, meaning everyone? Because it hurts, all these things hurt all of us.
Talk about a topic that just hit me like this. You're great to be chatting with. This is a great visit.
Oh, I'm enjoying this visit.
Talk about this. One of the areas within the Black culture is the matriarch, the grandmother of the family.
How beautiful.
The role in influence, punishment, rewards, receiving the blessings of the female grandmother. Talk about the matriarch.
Yeah, and so the blessing, that's so beautiful, because that reminds me of one of the tenets, one of the foundations of this book that's coming out, and what I used in the chapter. So when we think about our matriarchs, and I think about my beautiful grandmothers, what we get there is lessons of resilience. We get lessons of history. We get all this information on how to move forward and how to be positioned in a blessed way in a society that often stands against us and who we are. So I want to mention something here.
Okay.
this idea, this theoretical framework of Afrocentricity. The reason why I'm saying this is because...
You want to define?
Yeah, I do.
Okay,
so
please.
When we look at Afrocentricity, we're looking at some philosophical tenets that involve collective identity, survival, which we as Black women have done since the enslavement period, our spirituality, and our affective knowledge. And when I say affective knowledge, I mean our feeling knowledge and the intuition that we have that combines with our spirituality. The things that our grandmothers told us about how you handle things, how you take care of yourself, what kind of herbs to use for different situations, how you need to handle yourself in different situations. All of that is part of Afrocentricity. The collective identity speaks to the fact that we're not moving alone. Just like the civil rights movement did not move alone, and we as women, many women beyond Rosa Parks, were part of that movement. We move as a group. We move in strategy. We move in unity. And so that is a tenet of what we would call Afrocentricity. And within the book chapter, I examine the history of that in our blessed positionality to move our health forward as Black women.
Without going further, title of the book.
The title
and
of the
book,
author. Yeah. The title of the book is Blessed Positionality. Okay. And I'm not one of the editors, but Dr. Sarisi West Olatunji is one of the editors. And then I'm the author of the chapter Reclaiming Our Health as a Place of Liberation.
Absolutely. When you talked again about the matriarch, much of their philosophy and shared lives, which is what I can think of, it was based on their spiritual background.
That was one of the tenets I mentioned.
Faith-based was so strong.
Our faith,
And yet to conflict faith-based for a person with dealing with realities of harm, death, and what have you is not an easy task to respond
and that
to.
is our legacy, right, as Black people and as a Black woman, of how that went and how the spirituality carried us through. And now when you look at some of the programming that Black women are doing for their own health, some of it is happening in churches. Like, for example, my church here in Murfreesboro, First Baptist Church of Murfreesboro, where I'm a licensed minister, we have health programs there. So I'm saying that because it matches exactly what you're saying, how we're combining the spirituality with the health, because we've always done that through our prayers, through our liberation, through all through these different periods of time. That has been our strength and our resilience.
How are you finding, through your colleagues, how are you finding the students who are enrolled in your program as a major or as a sub-major? How are you finding them adapting? How are they bringing 2024 values to a topic that has far deeper roots than just the current year?
Well, I think yes. And I think we are blessed with the privilege of bringing them historical concepts, which, you know, history is 2020 at this point, not even beyond that. But then also listening and respecting the concerns that they currently have in terms of health for everyone. Mental health is a concern for many of our students, right? And so we look at this, again, you know, thinking about this book chapter and thinking about what you just said about the students. How do we remind them of how they can work around their strengths? And what they bring in 2024.
In my teaching, the number one objective, if I have a number one objective of teaching besides sharing information and sharing knowledge, is to instill a sense of hope and optimism and love for the future. I have found, this is a generalization like so many of these topics will create, I have found that today's students, and this is over a lot of years of teaching, have very little regard for history. If something's more than 5 years old, well, it's the old people, that's way back, you know, and what have you. And I have to believe that if we know what the historical roots are in our particular topics and apply them to the predictions of what the roots could create and blossom and bloom in the future, we're doing our job. I still am so impressed and amazed at the variety of disciplines that you have within your
Yes.
department. Do they all merge together, or are they separate? I mean,
They're very different, but yet the unity of it is to help, to be a help in our communities. I want to go back to something that you said about young people and history. And so one of the things that we're hoping, even with this book chapter, is that we're looking at history and bringing it into the present. So, for example, thinking again about Black History Month, within this chapter, I give a lot of examples of resilience of Black women in health. So when we go back and think about the enslavement period, we have women, Black women, who were midwives and doulas, not only for their own families, but for the people who had enslaved them. And they very strategically used that in different cases to make sure that their own families and children were taken care of, even though they were having to take care of the slave owners' children. But moving forward beyond that, even when we look at Fannie Williams in Chicago, who created the first nursing program so that Black women could go to nursing school. Then we move forward to Mary Rose Reeves Allen at Howard University, who created health promotion wellness programs to increase the self-esteem and wellness and well-being of Black women as a professor, to start to negate the very negative narratives that were created about Black women during the enslavement period and beyond. So these are all very positive places of blessed positionality. And I mention these because, to your point, this is the history that we can teach, even when our young people don't know that they need to know some history of people who have moved forward in spite of what was going on, and all of the positive health promotion programs that are happening now to narrow health disparities. And to your point earlier, how can that be used to bring in all of our communities, and also think about other groups of people, as Black women have always brought other groups along, and also historically cared for other groups when we really look at the history. So how do we teach that and bring that as hope, like you just said, and bringing that into the present, and making sure that Black women continue to move forward and bring along other women, and not just be considered the stats,
exactly,
right? The numbers.
Well, and the key word we have to address at this
hope.
point is economics, too.
Yes,
and
thank you so much.
For example, the African American population in the United States is roughly 42 million out of 335 million. The percentage of men and women in the African American community who are now in the employment world more than just playing a housekeeper or playing a cook, but in highly professional, well-paid areas, has just risen dramatically. We can thank much of the legislation of the 1960s and 1970s. We can thank a lot of the court decisions of the 1980s and 1990s that helped trying to create an equal opportunity in a very legitimate manner, not just in terms of paper. We have to talk about, in terms of performance and the contributions being made by people of all backgrounds and all races and all cultures and all parts of society, no matter who they are, and the contributions to be measured on success. So I would probably say economics and healthcare do go hand in hand.
That. They really, really do. And what's interesting when we look at economics and health, economics makes such a difference in, it connects to your educational levels.
Exactly.
Your access, your ability to make choices. And what's interesting and disturbing when we look at health outcomes in terms of the Black community and even Black women, during this Black History Month, when we look at the Black morbidity and mortality rates, this is just an example, we see that the economics does not matter. We see that women of all educational levels, such as myself, who's a PhD, to, as you pointed out, maybe a Black woman who is working as a housekeeper, to a Black woman who owns the housekeeping business, that this morbidity and mortality issue seems to exceed economics. And so we have to look then, and the research is showing this, that there has to be something within the healthcare systems and within treatment that is now being documented.
We'll be right back for our third and final segment, but we are having a wonderful Thursday morning visit with Chandra Story, Dr. Chandra Story, from the Health and Human Performance Department at MTSU. We'll be right back, folks.
Thank you.
Finding that missing shin guard, remembering whether it's a home or away game, getting the right kid to the right playing field on the right day. Why are simple things sometimes so complicated? Thankfully, with auto owners, insurance doesn't have to be one of them. We work with independent agents who keep insurance simple so you can worry about more important things, like not being that fan.
Oh, come on, Ref!
That's simple human sense.
Rayburn Insurance in Smyrna.
Come see me, Rick Hall, at Rayburn Insurance in downtown Smyrna today.
It's a critical time in education, and we need experience on the Rutherford County School Board. That's why we need to elect Butch Vaughn to the school board in Zone 6. He brings experience as a public educator from his years in the classroom and as a coach to being principal at Central and Blackman Middle and Oakland High Schools. Butch Vaughn has also been in private education as the former headmaster at PCA. Experience counts, especially now. That's why we need Butch Vaughn on the Rutherford County School Board. Paid for by Butch Vaughn for School Board. Prior Manning, Treasurer.
This is Kim Dunaway from Sunshine Nutrition Center. You hear me on Monday mornings at 7:20 talking about how to lead a healthier lifestyle. We carry supplements, personal care, and grocery items at both our Murfreesboro and Smyrna locations, family owned and operated since 1989.
Here at Bud's Tire, we make buying Michelin tires simpler. I'm Allison Mitchell with Bud's Tire Pros. We offer a straightforward approach to service, including nationwide warranties with every purchase. Stop in today to see our full lineup of Michelin and BF Goodrich tires. For whatever you drive, Michelin and BF Goodrich have a tire to fit any need. Bud's Tire Pros, hassle-free, guaranteed. We're located on East Main Street, exactly 3 miles from the town square, 1 mile past Rutherford Boulevard. Visit us online at budstireprostn.com.
Hi, this is Bob Cornell, pastor of Covenant Church right here in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. The answer that you've been looking for is found in Jesus and what he accomplished at the cross. You see, Jesus changes lives from the inside out. We would love for you to join us at Covenant Church, located at 1124 Brinkley Ave right here in Murfreesboro. We have services Sunday morning at 10:30 a.m. and Tuesdays at 7 p.m. You can learn more about us at our Cornell Ministries YouTube channel. We want you to grow in Christ at Covenant Church.
This is the Roundtable from News Radio WGNS on FM 101.9 and AM 1450 Murfreesboro, FM 100.5 Smyrna, and worldwide at WGNSradio.com.
Bill Kraus for the third and final segment of the Thursday morning WGNS Roundtable on a beautiful morning with a beautiful lady as our guest and visitor on WGNS, Dr. Chandra Story, who is professor and interim chair. We got to do something about deleting the word interim of the Health and Human Performance Department. If you were to have a magic wand to make the future perfect, we can't make the human experience perfect, but we can sure work toward it, to make the world perfect for not only black women, brown women, Asian women, and Caucasian white women, and men of the same categories, what would you do? And this is part of the educational mission.
Yes, it would be that we fully respect and honor and include each other within our history, present, and future. And that means we are all willing to really hear each other as we are sharing each other's story and have respect and empathy for those stories. And I think as we do that, we can all stand in our blessed positionality. And I think we can all find liberation in those places when we do that.
I would also say it's one of the first things I teach in the study of political science. Always either start out your verbal presentation or in a response to a midterm or final exam question. Start out, in my opinion. And so often we are seeing people in this divided world today and divided nation that people will give their opinions, which should be encouraged, which should be urged, but start out, in my opinion, because people will express their opinion as its fact. And if the fact doesn't jive with you are, guess what? You were telling off the air an interesting story, and it certainly highlights black history, that there were churches that were segregated as well as schools.
Yes, and so I was sharing that I am a member and licensed minister at the First Baptist Church on Castle Street. There's also a First Baptist Church on Main. So that is actually a good example of, and I wanted to say, you were mentioning opinion, definitely declaring your own opinion. And we need to learn to respect people's actual lived experiences, which is not necessarily the same as my opinion.
Sure.
And so, speaking of lived experiences, though the First Baptist on Castle Street and the First Baptist on Main Street, that is a historical separation, as the one on Main Street is a predominantly white church, and the one on Castle Street remains as a predominantly black church. And the history of that goes back to the enslavement period. However, when we talk about lived experiences and moving forward, those churches now work together. There are worship services where they come together at least once a year. So that's an example, I think, in what you were talking about. And again, Magic Wand, lived experiences, there needs to be a respect for lived experiences. And I think if we actually do that, it will make a difference in moving forward. And Black women have led the way in terms of, and again, I'm community and public health. So we have blazed our own trail in terms of remedying some of these health issues. And it's a good spot where we will continue to bring in other groups that you've mentioned. And hopefully people will continue to respect lived experiences and move forward and incorporate these lived experiences into our curricula.
Without getting into a whole controversial area, I believe in having a respect for diversity is key. But equally, once you identify diversity, then you identify what we share in common.
Absolutely.
And where's our unity? And I think if we ever stop thinking about what do we share versus what makes us different, I want to appreciate each individual as who they are, where they came from, what their experience of life has been, what they bring to the table.
Absolutely.
But when it's all said and done, I want to be sure that the unity, that what commonalities do we have?
Yeah.
It would be interesting to, and I'm sure there's a lot of research and discussion and education on it, but if you were to take other advocacy groups for Hispanic, and I have to watch generalizations. We seem to lump people into automatic
and we never
groups.
want to do that. And can I say something?
Yes,
so when we
please.
talk about Black feminism and intersectionality, that's the whole purpose. We talk about intersecting identities. We talk about there's no group in any place in the world that's a monolith.
No.
And so this historical account that I have within this chapter and moving into the present is just that, and moving into the present of what's happening and recognizing the diversity within Black women, recognizing the diversity within our communities. I love what you said about unity. I'm very blessed in that I have family members. My parents actually marched with Martin Luther King.
Oh, really?
And we know that that movement would have never occurred without all of the different groups across the country, across religions, across race, and across ethnicity. And so I would say this is all about how he shared his lived experience and unified people at the same time. And that's what we hope for this book chapter, in that it would be used as a place for people to learn about the lived experiences of Black women, reflect on their own experiences, and think about how can we unify to have better health in our communities.
It's an interesting point I share in political science, in my opinion. I got to stress in my opinion.
Yes.
I think accolades should be made to the millions of white citizens who took the effort in 2008 to vote for Barack Obama for president. Not that Barack Obama brought a great agenda or background to the political scene. He didn't. He was a U.S. Senator under 2 years. He was a state senator in Illinois. But millions of white Americans wanted to send a special message that we have come a long way and we are going to elect our first Black president. And I think, you could criticize that if you may, but on the other hand, it was a statement made by millions of people just to say we have come a long way from 1861.
We are going to keep, I think the whole thing with this, with the Roundtable, is that we want to keep moving a long way forward, and we want to move forward together.
Holding hands and holding thoughts and sharing feelings is so key.
Yes.
I can't begin to add you are such a bright light And,
Thank you.
And, I would certainly hope, and I can't even hope, I'm going to assume, that there are many men and women who are in or have completed the program of yours at MTSU, and they walk away not only a little wiser, but a little more feeling, a little more sensitivity, and most importantly, climbing the mountain together.
Yes,
and I think we
together.
all want to climb to the top
We
of the mountain.
do.
We may take different trails. Some of us may ride on the back of a donkey. Some of us may be carried by 4 people on a stretcher. But we all want to reach to the top of the mountain, whether that's your faith-based
Yes.
or whether that's your ideal base. We all want to be the very best we can, hopefully. I mean,
Yes.
I probably get more frustrated with a student by saying, well, there's really not much in life to think about. Not suicidal necessarily, but again, without hope, without aspirations, without love, without
Yes.
a general feeling. So I think it would be best said that Black History Month, like any historical month, is a time for us to stand back, take a look, take a deep breath, and say, how can we make 2024, 2025, and the years ahead better for our children and better for our grandchildren? Can't say it any better.
Yes, and how can we continue to advocate? How can we honor our lived experiences? They're all unique, and value and honor each other in moving forward for optimal health. Because when one is healthy, more of us can be healthy. And that's why we really need to consider all of those things.
While we're getting ready to close, I guess
Yes.
I would ask you this last question,
Okay.
a complex question, which may require a return attendee. Which comes first, your emotional, psychological health of who you are, or your physical health of what you are?
Well, going back to Afrocentricity, which can I say?
Oh, sure.
This Afrocentricity is a theoretical construct that can be applied to anyone because we're talking about collective identity. But I'm saying this because within that construct, we're talking about holistic health.
Mhm.
So really, I would say quickly, one does not come before the other.
They go
we
equally.
need to be well. We need
Mhm.
our communities to be well in terms of our environment and the physical environment. And then we need to be well in terms of our complete health. And I mentioned spirituality. And
Mhm.
so in that term, it all goes together. And we need to always look at all of those components of wellness as one because they all impact each other.
Absolutely. You
Yes.
know, probably any medical professional would talk to a patient and say, I want you to be positive. I want you to be encouraged. Now, on the other hand, we have to watch that we don't become Mary Poppins
Absolutely.
and say the
Back to
world's
our
going to be
lived
great.
experiences.
We've got a solution. We're going to solve this
Yes.
issue. And you're
Yes.
talking to a terminally ill patient.
Absolutely.
And the query is, anytime, and I used to volunteer at hospice years ago, and the first thing we were taught, never tell the patient something that is not true. And if you're going to say you're going to outlive the doctor,
Yes.
absolutely not. Absolutely not. And you want to be honest. Anytime, I always remember in hospice, I always said, tell us what you have thoroughly enjoyed about life. Tell us what you want to share with other
Yes.
people about life. Tell us those highlights. Tell us those
Yes.
points. Enjoy, live, relive the
Yes.
history. And these are all so important factors of who we are and what we
Of
are.
who we are and our lived experiences and our health, and to actually listen and really hear each other and honor that. That is healthy.
Oh, absolutely. And you begin to think, look at your life.
Yes.
And look at your young life of being at almost all 4 corners of the United States. Chicago and Boise and
Yes.
Atlanta and Oklahoma, etc. But look at your life. And each one was a chapter.
Each one was a chapter.
Now, do you see some other writings coming ahead for you?
I would hope so. I would really hope so. And I'm so excited about this being, out hopefully by summer and
Mhm.
have more conversations. And as you point out, engaging conversations for all of us. And I've
Exactly.
taught women's health as well. So all this works out together.
Do women and men talk about health to each other?
That's a good question. Sometimes, can I leave with that? Sometimes.
Like anything.
I think we need to talk a lot more, and maybe this conversation is part of that beginning.
Exactly. Or mothers and grandmothers talking to daughters. Probably very little of fathers, grandfathers talking to sons about
Right.
their health.
And again, with this chapter being on Black womanhood, we often talk about how this information needs to be passed down even more. And some of it gets passed down. As Black women, we pass a lot of things down in stories. So again, how do we incorporate that in the greater narrative? Tell our stories in a blessed way that helps our health and is helping the health of others. And is examples for others in narratives and storytelling, right?
And the reverse of that is listen to others who are telling those stories.
Listen.
Listen to others. It isn't just the responsibility to tell a story of some true experiences in life. It's also a responsibility to listen to those people telling the story. Listen not only to the obvious, listen to some of the subtleties that come out in that story. And you may pick up things, for example, I have a chore that I have to, I don't call it a chore, I have a responsibility. I have to preside over a memorial service for my brother on Saturday out in California.
Sorry to hear that.
And, do I just do the who, what, where, why, and when? What made him tick for 86 years? What was his special life contribution in 86 years? And those become reality. They become reality that we learn from others who have experienced happiness. We've learned from others who have experienced sadness, and we've learned from others who have experienced anger. And how do we at least pick up? I will ask students, for example, if you had to resolve an issue, how would you resolve it? And they've got to think. Well, it has been a wonderful morning, Chandra Story. Dr. Chandra Story, professor and interim chair of the Health and Human Performance Department at Middle Tennessee State University. You are a blessing to have on the air, and more specifically, you are helping build a more wonderful world.
And you are a blessing to this community, and I can't thank you enough for this opportunity.
Thank you, and we'll see you all next week.